So to migrate from Dynamics GP over to Business Central, the first thing we need to do is install the integration runtime on the server where we have Dynamics GP. So I'm logged into Business Central into a test company here. And I'm going to go to the assisted setup section, and I'm going to select the setup cloud migration. When I do that, it's going to walk me through a wizard. I've already run it against once already, and I'm just going to go through this process again here just so you can see what it looks like. So first thing I'm going to do is accept the warning and privacy, hit next. I then will select the product that I want to migrate, so Dynamics GP, hit next. I then need to supply the SQL connection string and the runtime name. So if I leave this blank, it's going to download the runtime for me, and we'll go through the runtime setup. First thing I need to do is the connection string. So there is documentation on Microsoft Docs about what to put in the connection string here. Typically, it's going to be your server name, Dynamics instance, and SA account and password that you're going to use for the connection string. So let's go ahead and do that. So the connection string is going to look something like this. So server, database, always Dynamics, user ID and password that you're using. So we can highlight, just close this. I already have my connection string saved, and I'm just going to paste it into here. And we're going to hit next. This takes a few seconds. Now is the step where we would normally download the self-hosted integration runtime and install that, and I'll walk through the steps of what that looks like. And then we have to back out of everything, basically go through the steps again and supply the integration runtime ID in the previous step that we went through. So I'm just going to back out of this for now, and we'll go through the integration self-hosted integration runtime installation. When installing the integration runtime on the server, first thing you're going to do is copy the authentication key and then paste that into this area here. You're going to hit next and basically register that authentication key. It's then going to prompt you, basically give you this information that it's created the integration runtime with the server name and what the actual integration service is. And that's pretty much it for the integration runtime installation. After you've done that, the next thing you're going to do is basically, like I said, back out all the way and then come back into the data migration setup, go through the steps again, put in your SQL connection key and put in your integration runtime name that's applicable, and then you're going to hit next. And that's going to connect to the integration runtime service at this point. Takes a little while to connect. The process will then see the list of companies that you have available to you or that are part of your SQL instance. So in this case, I'm migrating TWO, which is Fabricam Test Company. I could select I'll migrate all the companies or select individual companies. I'm going to hit next. It's then going to go through this process, and because Business Central sees the main account, not the associated segments to your main account, it takes those associated segments and puts them into what's called dimensions. So department and division are two segments associated with my GP account, and those go into dimension 1 and dimension 2. I could also I'm also going to migrate inactive customers and inactive vendors, but I could skip this step. I would then hit next and associate a schedule with the data migration process. Because we're just going to run this the one time, I'm just going to leave this as is, or I could set a schedule. I would hit next. And basically that's the process of finishing. I would hit finish and it would finish setting up the wizard. Once I finish that process, it's going to bring me into the Cloud Migration Management screen. And what I can do is run a diagnostic. So I can hit create diagnostic run. This will just make sure that there's no errors before migrating the data. I could also schedule the migration now. If I go to the actions pane, also I have the ability to do a few other things. I can reset the cloud data as well, or change my schedule, or take a copy of my database and go to the Azure Data Lake, and I'll talk about that after. For in our case, or I could even disable the cloud migration if I didn't want to have it there. So in our case, we're just going to run the migration now. So after I've hit run migration now, I'm going to see this manual trigger I've selected here, full migration. It's currently in progress and it's starting to migrate to my data. I can hit refresh status to see the updated status of this. It should take, I've ran some other manual migrations. Basically it's 3 minutes or so in this particular case with a test database. So it could take, 5 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of your database and how much data it's migrating over. One thing you will notice is you first have to initialize your company because it's going to create the TWO company shell. So right now it's telling us company status not initialized. If I click on this box, it's basically saying not initialized. I can just basically have to click on schedule company initialization, hit yes. So it's just saying it's been scheduled, which will initialize this company. And that sort of error message now went away down here. And this, once again, will take our 2 minutes to initialize. So just things to be aware of, or if you saw migration errors as an example, or posting errors, you would, when running the create diagnostic run, it's going to update this information so you'll know that if there are some errors associated with it. So once I've run through the manual migration, you'll notice that I have 48 tables that I've successfully migrated. I can click on here and I will get a list of every single table that migrated over for that company, and then some different views. So I'm now going to talk about the data that does migrate and what doesn't come over from GP into Business Central. So things that come over are your chart of accounts, and I'll go through this shortly. But it's the main account, and then each segment is going to fall into a dimension. So obviously the 2 dimensions are going to go to dimension 1, dimension 2, which I showed before. The other thing that comes over is customer master records. So your list of your customers from the receivables module, and also the open receivables transactions and balances are going to come over. One thing to make note of is if I have a invoice in GP and it's $1,000 and I have $500 has already been applied to it, that invoice is going to come over for $500, not the $1,000 with an applied amount against it. So same thing with vendor master records are going to come over, and any open payables documents are going to come over as well. Also, open purchase orders will come over. That's the document amounts of the PO. And then your inventory items will come over with on-hand quantities will also be brought over. And also historical data for receivables, payables, sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory will come over, but it's not the actual line detail, just the high level of the data, just the actual document amounts. Also, checkbooks and outstanding transactions will also come over. And we'll review each one of those things shortly here, just so you can see what that looks like. So let's start off by looking at the, let's switch to our company to start off with that we just set up. So TWO. And okay. Now, if you've migrated the data, first time you log into this company, you may get prompted to put in bank information and the basic required fields for a company setup. I've already done that, so I'm not getting prompted in this case, but it's just the very generic stuff. So, and it's going to switch over to our Business Central environment for that company. And now let's go to our chart of accounts as an example. So notice, here's the same chart of accounts that I would have in GP. So you can see all my accounts are listed here. Type of account, our subcategories are coming over, the account types. So if it's posting account or not is all listed here. Next thing, let's jump into our customers. So you can see all my GP customers are here with the balances on their accounts. So as an example, if I looked at Aaron Fitz, I have a balance of 24,000. If I jump over into GP, and we're going to go to transaction sales, or sorry, inquiry sales, and we're going to go to customer summary. Let's bring up Aaron Fitz. So I have Aaron Fitz brought up here. As you can see, I have the normal GP information. If we jump back to Business Central, we go to Aaron Fitz account. So you'll notice the our balances here, total sales, phone numbers come over, zip code, the address information. We also have default tax schedules that have come over. Payment information at 30 days has come over. That's been associated to that customer. So there's quite a bit of information coming over from the GP system. If we switch back to payables, let's go to purchasing and vendors. So you notice that the vendors are coming over, and we have Ace Travel, balance of $6,700. If I now go into GP and go to inquiry, purchasing, payable summary, and we look at Ace Travel, we will see that there is $6,763 on the account, or that is the current balance. And let's just go back to here, 6713.27. I could even drill into that amount, and I would see what makes up the amount. The one thing you will notice is the external document numbers being brought over. So our GP document numbers here, and the associated voucher number is here. So just something to be aware of, that it's how it brings over these documents. It does concatenate the external document number with the voucher number. If we look at our inventory items, you'll see our inventory items are brought over. I can see our unit cost amount. I can even see the quantity on hand. So the 128 SD RAM, I see the total quantity available on hand, It's not broken out by site currently, but I'm sure that is something that Microsoft is looking at to bring over in future release. Also, if I go back to, let's go back to purchasing for a second. Let's go to vendors. While I'm on the vendor list, if I was to type in GP here, and this only works on I can actually see different smart lists of information that have come over. So for example, I can see receiving line transactions, and this only works on the more GP payables transactions. So this is coming over as basically a table of all the records. I don't have the ability to drill into any one of these. It's just the table, like I said, a smart list of the data from GP, and I can obviously apply filters and do some other stuff to look at this, but also same thing with if I'm on the sales side and I go to customers and we look at GP here. I have GP sales quotes and orders. So once again, if I look at orders, I'm going to get presented with a list of all the orders, the dates, the actual amounts, but I can't see the actual line detail. In these windows, I can only see the associated documents and document amounts. Something else that is brought over is open purchase orders that are in the system that aren't received against or invoiced. So for the purchase orders, notice these are the POs that were brought over. If I select one of these, I also have the line detail associated with the PO, and then the document amount here listed. Something else that can be done is when you've moved all your data over to Business Central and are no longer using Dynamics GP as an example, and you don't want to maintain that server anymore that you had your GP SQL instance associated with, you can actually move your data or a copy of your data to what's called Azure Data Lake. This is very cheap or fairly inexpensive storage. So we basically set up a storage account, and then we go through the Azure process. So let me just switch over to our Business Central environment once again. And if we go back to our cloud migration management listing, and we go to actions, one of the actions was Azure Data Lake. So when I select this, I'm going to get basically, I have to accept the warnings, hit next. I then will supply the storage account name and the storage account key. Once I've done that, what it's going to do is migrate my data over to the Azure Data Lake. So it'll create this container called GP database. And in there, it's going to put in my Dynamics database and then any company database that I have associated with that SQL instance that I've connected through the runtime. And when I expand these, you'll notice that it puts everything in nice little folders for me. So for example, I can go to sales and I can select a sales table. So let's go SOP 10100 as an example. And I have a CSV file that I can click on, and I can download this or look at the information. I could also use Power BI to connect to the Azure Data Store Data Lake and give my data that way if I really wanted to, but I'm going to hit download. So as you can see, here's a list of all my invoices, all the columns that you would normally see in the table. So extremely powerful. Doesn't take that long to run to move all your data up to the, now I have a copy of it sitting in the cloud and I can get rid of that on-premise server, and this is read-only data that I'm not actually modifying in any way. So One important thing to note about the migration process is that you run it the first time, and then every scheduled time it runs after that particular first time it's run, it's just going to then migrate any changes that have been made to your GP system. So, for example, if my if I had a couple of customers where their on account amount has changed, it's now going to change that and migrate over new opening balances for those customers. But other accounts that have the same balances, obviously not going to touch those particular customers. If for some reason something goes wrong, I can always reset the cloud data, which will basically wipe it out and allow me to start fresh. So that concludes our look at migrating your Dynamics GP data over to Business Central. The one positive thing you can take out of this is that this allows you to look at moving to the cloud or look at the Dynamics GP to Business Central migration path without actually flipping that switch and getting off of Dynamics GP. So you can run both systems in parallel and actually look at GP or Business Central to actually see what your data looks like and maybe see some of the shortcomings that Business Central has, such as potentially some third parties that may not be in Business Central yet, some types of data that are not coming over to Business Central, and see if it's going to fit your particular business needs. The other key thing to note is that as part of your Dynamics GP enhancement, you actually are getting Business Central licenses. So we can take advantage of this to get and potentially contact Profit Business or to get started with the migration path to Business Central.